Rents continue to increase across capital cities. Sydney is experiencing its fastest rental rise in 2 decades. Auctions were a little quieter due to school holidays. And what impact does this week's hold on interest rates have on the property market? Well, joining us live is Angus Moore, economist at PropTrack. How are you, Angus? Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's start with auctions affected by school holidays. How's it going?
Yeah, look, it's going to be a quieter weekend this weekend for a couple reasons. School holidays is obviously a big part of that, but it is also winter, and winter tends to be a quieter time across auction markets and across property markets around the country. So not a surprise that we're seeing a bit of a quieter weekend. If we're looking over the last sort of month or so, we have seen auction clearance rates cool off a little bit. They're still pretty good. They're better than what we were seeing late last year. So still an improvement from there, but maybe not as strong as we were seeing during the height of the autumn selling season.
All right, and what about rents? There's certainly been a lot of talk, certainly with the Minns government this week looking to implement laws, including potentially not allowing landlords to increase rents several times in the year. We are seeing them rise across most of the country. What's happening in capital cities, first of all?
Yeah, we're seeing extremely brisk growth in rents at the moment. So we had data out this week on median advertised rents on realestate.com.au. Nationally, they're up 2%. Over the past year, up nearly 12%. And that's being led by capital cities, which is a bit of a change from what we were seeing during the pandemic when regional areas were really leading the charge. To maybe put a fine point under that, median rents for units in Sydney and Melbourne over the past year have grown nearly 20%, which is pretty staggering growth, really. Now, part of the story there is that we actually saw rents for units in Sydney and Melbourne fall during the start of the pandemic and into 2021. So some of that's catch up, but certainly not all of it. Rents in both Sydney and Melbourne for units are now higher than they were pre-pandemic. They're about 20% higher in Sydney and a little over 10% higher in Melbourne.
And what are your thoughts on the Minns government looking to implement those laws?
Yeah, so it would largely bring New South Wales in line with other states. Many other states have restrictions on how frequently rents can be raised, and largely that's not going to have a huge impact on the rental market. I think what would be concerning is if we're looking at, tying down how quickly rents can rise. That's policies that have been implemented other places in the world, but they tend to have fairly pernicious effects on investment in property, lead to poor maintenance. They can have bad effects in terms of selection into which rentals get chosen by landlords. So not what I'd want to see, but I don't think that's what the government's looking at the moment.
All right, and what about the regions? It looks like they're moderating a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. We're starting to maybe see some good news for renters in the regions, though, I'd say starting very much so. Rents are actually flat over the past 3 months in the regions, across regional areas, though they're still up about 6% over the past year. So still pretty brisk over that period. But the fact that they were flat is consistent with what we're starting to see in the regions, which is rental supply is starting to improve and there is a bit more availability. That's helping take some of the pressure out. It's, clearly rent increases of 6% over the past 12 months is still pretty brisk, but it does look like we might be through the worst of it for regional renters.
All right, and interest rates were put on hold this week, but there is a possibility, experts are saying 3 more possible rate rises before the end of the year. How do you see this unfold in the property market?
Yeah, it's a great question. Clearly inflation does remain too high at the moment, and so the RBA will have more interest rate rises to come. How many more, I think, is an open question, and I think it's probably an open question the RBA doesn't know the answer to just yet, and will really depend on how inflation kind of evolves over this year. To date, we've seen home prices hold up pretty well despite those higher interest rates. They have come off from peak, but we've seen this year quite a strong recovery, particularly in Sydney, where prices are up 4.5% since late last year. If we were to see a faster increase in interest rates, that's obviously going to be a headwind for prices. Higher interest rates reduce how much borrowers can borrow and therefore how much they're willing to spend. So it will be a headwind. How much, I think, remains to be seen based on how inflation turns out.
All right, we'll always appreciate your time and expertise. Angus Moore, thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.